It's like watching the human species fall off the edge of the cliff in real time. Hi, my name is Sydney, welcome back to hell. And as per usual, before we launch in, today's video is sponsored by Foom. Now, I will admit that I, on the odd occasion, do enjoy watching reality TV. It's like Valium for your brain. Makes you stupid. But more than anything, reality TV has a really good habit of highlighting the most bizarre people with the most bizarre stories. It's sort of like the modern equivalent of the carnival freak show. And rather than having to go to a smelly carnival, because I don't know why anybody would ever go to a carnival, we get to sit and watch these people from the comfort of our own homes and point and judge them and make content about it. We're such a pleasant species. With the emergence of legislation across the country and around the world designed to halt the transitioning of children, one particular individual on one particular reality show has been thrust back into the spotlight. In past weeks, a recent clip from the TLC show I Am Jazz went viral. It showed a conversation between Jazz Jennings and mother Jeanette, where Jazz expresses regret and discomfort, saying, "I never feel like me ever."
I feel kind of all over the place and like my mind is very cluttered and not clear. And I really want to have that clarity. I really want to understand myself and be able to read my own soul and what I want. And it's just very challenging. And I think I'm kind of breaking down a little bit and spiraling into negativity. I just want to feel like myself. Like, that's it. I don't care. All I want is to be happy and feel like me, and I don't feel like me ever.
From this clip alone, some people have concluded that this show's transition ultimately makes a person even more unhappy, while others have said that Jazz's feelings have absolutely nothing to do with being transgender, but rather the anxiety and depression many people experience. Not that anyone asked me for my opinion, but I'm just thinking maybe it's all connected. Now, if you live on planet Earth, here with the rest of us, crying about the destruction of our society, you likely will have come into contact with the name Jazz Jennings before. Jazz was essentially popularized as America's first trans child, whose entire transition and life was broadcast on television and made the subject of public consumption in a way no other transgender youth or even adult had been before. I Am Jazz first aired on TLC in 2015 when Jazz was just 14 years old, and the show really paved the way for trans youth to become a subject of conversation in the public eye. Jazz has always been hailed by activists as the model trans child, and has served to normalize transgender children over the years. While so many people appear to view Jazz's story as a raging success, as time wears on, the reality and the truth behind Jazz's life, this transition and all the things associated, appears to be a lot darker. As Jazz's life has continued on in the public eye, I think it's becoming clearer and clearer that transitioning, especially as a child, is not as easy as it appears on TikTok.
I want to talk to all the trans kids for a second. So if you're a trans kid, get comfortable for a couple minutes, and if you're the parent of a trans kid, then, bring them over to the phone or bring the phone over to them, whatever works. Hi, I'm James. My pronouns are they, she.
Right to jail, right away.
So that's what we're going to talk about today. Jazz Jennings and how the trans dream died on national television. But you know what should also die? Any bad habit that you might have that involves your mouth and other things you put in your mouth, which is why today's video is sponsored by Foom. It's true that stopping your bad habit cold turkey is very hard. And the alternatives are not great. You can either pick between using these weird chemical-filled contraptions or the voodoo that your friend's aunt told you about, where you must drink a bunch of celery juice and rub your dog's head. I don't think this is working! But Foom is different. It helps you turn a bad habit into a good one. Foom is an innovative, award-nominated device that gives you an alternative to any hand-to-mouth habit. Instead of electronics, Foom is completely natural. Instead of vapors, Foom uses flavored air. And let me be clear, this is not a vape. Because unlike a vape, nothing is being heated, it doesn't use harmful chemicals that get in your bloodstream, but instead has these neat little cores that taste and smell pretty damn good. The minty one reminds me of Christmas. Foom also has adjustable airflow and is designed with movable parts and magnets to give your fidgety fingers something to do, which is calming for your anxiety and stress. unlike the alternatives. Ah! So don't do weird brain voodoo. Head over to tryfoom.com/Sydney or click the link in the description and use code Sydney for 10% off when you buy a Journey Pack. The Journey Pack comes with 3 unique flavors and everything you need to finally kick your bad habit. On October 6, 2000, a brown-eyed little boy called Jaren, I think that's how you say this, was born. At 15 months old, he'd allegedly unsnap the buttons on his onesie and pull it down to make a dress. Yeah, because that's a really strong indicator that your kid isn't a boy. Jeez Louise, just point the missile right at my face. At around the age of 2, depending on where you get your information, Jaren's parents expressed that their little boy was in fact a little girl, and began socially transitioning their son, whose name became Jazz. Social transitioning is the process of a child beginning to live as the opposite gender. That might come with different clothes, a different name, and being referred to by different pronouns. By 5, Jazz's parents had found a primary school that would use female pronouns for Jazz, who was also dressing as a girl at this point. A short time later, at only 6 years old, Jazz's story went national when it was covered by journalist Barbara Walters on the ABC News show 2020. Is Barbara Walters a journalist? Can I call her a journalist? I don't know. You've got to remember that this was 2007, and the issue of transgenderism was still quite foreign to your average American. Social justice causes dedicated to transgender individuals were not that widespread, so the 2020 interview with Jazz was really very interesting to the American public. That was then. Just a short time later, I bet you're all sick of hearing about this shit. During this interview, Jennings, Jazz's mother, said, "A phase is called a phase because it is just that. It ends. And this is not ending. It's just getting stronger." A few years later, in 2011, a documentary was released on the Oprah Winfrey Network called I Am Jazz, A Family in Transition, which once again looked at Jazz and the Jennings family. And actually, FYI, Jennings is not even the family's actual last name. It was just used as a pseudonym to protect the family's identity, which, I don't know, I guess kind of went out the window when you decided to go on national TV. Around this same time, at age 11, Jazz was put on puberty blockers. And a year later, at age 12, Jazz began cross-sex hormones. Now, the years that followed brought a lot of opportunities for the Jennings family. Jazz appeared on The Rosie Show, won a GLAAD Media Award, spoke around the country, co-wrote a children's book, and became a Johnson & Johnson spokesmodel. The Jennings parents, some years ago, started a trans child foundation, and Jazz was named one of Time Magazine's 25 most influential teens of 2014. 2014 was actually quite a big year for Jazz, who appeared on many important lists in many important magazines that I've never heard of. Yeah, can't say that I've got any good reason to read out. Unless, of course, it helps me get out of this psycho time period. But 2015 was the game changer. This was the year that TLC's I Am Jazz aired for the very first time. And in the almost decade following, we've been able to view potentially America's most well-known transgender child, and now fledgling adult, go through the trials and tribulations of transition. In the years that followed, Jazz would become what appeared to be the model transgender adolescent. When people thought about transgenderism, they probably thought about Jazz. It was the mass consumer's first insight into what would just a few years later become a hotly contested international issue.
The bill bans gender-affirming medical care for minors.
A ban on gender-affirming health care for transgender youth.
Gender-affirming care for minors.
Bill that was just introduced in the state Senate that would restrict how schools and teachers interact with transgender children.
Imagine just how bad this would have been if TikTok was a thing when the likes of Jazz Jennings came onto the scene. Like, don't get me wrong. It's bad enough now. TikTok gave us Dylan Mulvaney.
For being a woman, and it's been a second since we last talked. I think I needed a few days to process the past year since day 365.
But if the 2007 emo kids had access to TikTok, ugh. Anyway, while there was a genuine curiosity around Jazz Jennings and the TLC show, there was also a lack of general information. But now, and as things escalate, we have more and more information about this topic and its outcomes. And with that knowledge in hand, looking back at I Am Jazz, it seems some alarming things were missed that may have seemed normal at the time. In fact, this is precisely the reason that old clips from I Am Jazz are now making the rounds online, particularly those those in relation to the bottom surgery Jazz had in 2018 at the age of 17. One in particular is a clip of Jazz's mother Jeanette suggesting that she would wake Jazz up in the middle of the night to make Jazz dilate. And if you don't know what that is, you have Google, and I'm not responsible for the results of that search.
I have woken Jazz out of a dead sleep and taken the dilator and put the lubrication on it and said, "Here, you take this and you put it in your vagina. If not, I will."
The bottom surgery in question is often made to appear in popular media as a straightforward, risk-free procedure. However, more and more information is coming to light that confirms the opposite. For example, one study out of California found that in the case of vaginoplasties, 25% of patients had a complication, and of that 25%, almost half required additional surgery. And one person died after their operation. So yeah, not terrific. The point is, complications are extremely common, and Jazz's own experience reflects this, having required 4 additional corrective procedures. This is made even worse when you consider this clip from season 5, where Jazz's mom gets mad because Jazz discussed with a television reporter some of these complications. Jennings says that Jazz is going to scare people, and that parents will inevitably write her asking if their kids will experience the same thing. Like, yes, Jeanette, they probably will. Why are you like this? So it turns out that unfortunately YouTube has actually blocked this clip in some countries, so I'm gonna have to summarize what's being said. Apologies for that. Jazz here is saying that everything unraveled and the stitches came apart, describing the negative experience post-surgery that was had. Jeanette responds by saying, "I told you not to do that. We don't want to scare people." Jazz then says, "It won't scare people. It's the reality." Jeanette then complains that this will in fact scare people, and she'll get emails and calls from parents concerned that this will too happen to their children. In a one-on-one interview with the crew away from Jeanette, Jazz says, "I experienced something major, and I can't just say, oh well, it went great, everything was perfect, because that's just not true." Personally, what I find so disturbing about this whole exchange is that in Jazz's mother not wanting to discuss the very real, very serious complications that can come about as a result of these surgeries that her own child has experienced in relation to these surgeries, it just feels extremely irresponsible. It also kind of feels like she's trying to hide the truth of the matter from parents who might be expressing their concerns, and from vulnerable young people and teenagers and even young adults who might be contemplating going down this road. Interestingly, Jazz, on the other hand, seems to actually want this information to be out there, and I have to give props for that, because genital surgeries are no joke, and there's no going back once you go under the knife. Yeah, no way to undo that snip. I have questions. Does nobody explain the permanence of plastic surgery to their patients? Like, what are you doing? Making money off of vulnerable, impressionable young people with mental illnesses? Okay, so you're just a doctor. Something that also needs to be understood here is that Jazz's experience with puberty blockers are part of the reason for some of these surgical issues. Given that Jazz started puberty blockers at such a young age and never went through atypical puberty, there was not enough penile skin to be used to create a neovagina. A 2018 article describes how doctors had to use a new technique because Jazz started using hormones at such a young age, meaning that there was not enough tissue to construct a vagina. Jazz's doctors instead had to use stomach lining tissue. Puberty blockers are, again, often painted to be harmless and without consequence for adolescents. On this channel, I've shared clips before of endocrinologists being like, well, if puberty blockers shrink a kid's testes, just remove them because they're not useful now.
Avery's testes never developed. In fact, she does not make any sperm. And her reproductive capability to be a biological parent has been eliminated. Her testes are non-functional. And in medicine, don't we often recommend the removal of non-functional organs?
Well, they've done it. I'm gonna need a stronger word than This person has a medical license. Like, ma'am, get in the sea, you insane person. The ongoing commentary around puberty blockers is that they really do just pause puberty until a child is ready to take whatever next step. Jazz's case, on the other hand, seriously and legitimately demonstrates that there are issues that come about from using these kind of drugs and giving them to children at such early ages. It's also worth considering here too that Jazz's surgeon, a trans-identified male called Marcy Bowers, said in a talk at Duke University that children who begin transition before puberty will never experience orgasm or adult sexual function.
The second is was an observation that I had that every single child who was, or adolescent who was truly blocked at Tanner stage 2 has never experienced orgasm. I mean, it's really about zero. These are of course, these are just assigned male at birth, so trans feminine, and it's because they never in their lives are exposed to testosterone. That doesn't change. That doesn't change. So blockers prevent the rise of testosterone, and they don't really go on testosterone at or around surgery or into adulthood. And so we don't know. They're going to have this sensation. There's no question about that. But are they going to be able to achieve sexual satisfaction?
This is the same doctor, mind you, who looked at Jazz's body and made comments about how Jazz could be a porn star with how many photos Bowers was taking of Jazz's genitalia.
Let me just take a picture too. Poor thing, you could be a porn star for all the photos are taken.
I don't know, there's probably a comment to be made somewhere here about a camera crew filming the nether regions of a minor, or in the very least an 18-year-old, while a doctor makes very bizarre jokes about the nether regions of said young person, and then putting it on television for the world to see.
Jail. Right away.
Like I said early on, Carnival Freak Show, I'm a normal person, and I don't like this. Jazz has also been the subject of conversation for gaining a significant amount of weight from a binge eating disorder. 5 years ago, Jazz discussed this in a YouTube video, followed up by another video discussing losing weight for bottom surgery. Since then, Jazz has gained the weight back and has admitted to suffering from both anxiety and depression.
By the time I was ready to go to Harvard, I was just in complete shambles, and I was actually struggling severely with mental health issues, severe depression and anxiety.
People have hypothesized that Jazz's mental health issues and weight gain are in relation to the surgery and many complications, but these theories have been pushed off by Jazz's own mother, Jeanette. Jeanette claimed Jazz was the most happy in the year following the first surgery. However, she also acknowledges that Jazz spiraled into depression shortly after this. This is in part what makes the recent viral clip of Jeanette and Jazz even more alarming. It was picked up by different media outlets and circulated widely around the internet. Trans activists were mostly silent about it, with the normal queer outlets not chiming in as they usually would. This is interesting, if only because the same people have covered so much of this young person's life and often used Jazz as a role model for trans youth. I think the fact of the matter is that, if anything, TLC's I Am Jazz has demonstrated that transition is not easy. And while it's easy to glamorize the process, make cutesy TikToks, and trivialize lifelong medicalization, this is a hard road. Jazz has expressed how challenging life is, from dating to surgical complications to the more recent clip of not feeling like oneself ever. Unfortunately, but not unsurprisingly, most of Jazz's negative experiences get glossed over by advocates of childhood transition, when they are a brutal reality of this entire process. I think there's also probably an entire conversation to be had here about the Jennings parents taking their toddler to see a gender specialist for having atypical male interests and expression, and also the mother. I've watched a lot of clips now, and there's just something really odd about the dynamic here, and I don't know if it's a Munchausen by proxy situation or something like that, but there's also a conversation to be had about Jeanette Jennings and this incredibly overbearing behavior towards Jazz. You know, I always do like to acknowledge that, you know, in these situations, maybe this person is in fact legitimately trans, and maybe they were since the beginning, and maybe this has got nothing to do with parents forcing their kids in a direction, but instead facilitating that child going down a very, very challenging road, and that's really sad. Or, on the other hand, and especially in this case, Maybe it's just a situation where you had a little gay boy and the parents transed away that gay. Regardless, from the age of about 6, Jazz Jennings has not had a single moment of privacy. All of the fights, the arguments, the trauma, the mental health issues, all of it has been captured by TLC and then broadcast to millions of people. And there's definitely something to be said about doing that. But perhaps even more tragically, in addition to the challenges of growing up being broadcast on TV, Jazz Jennings has become a political football, so to speak, tossed from side to side of the gender theory, gender ideology debate. Worse still is being the vessel by which childhood transition is glamorized, with so few people in the picture prepared to admit the brutal reality of growing up a trans child. And in the end, no matter where you stand on the issue, I think we can all agree that the life that Jazz Jennings has led in and out of the spotlight, on and off television, would be difficult for any young person to cope with. Now, before I open the floor to all of you, this is just a reminder to check out Foom using the link in the description. When you do and you buy a journey pack, you'll get 10% off. Now, I open the floor to all of you. What do you all think? Are these clips disturbing to you? Do you think they're not really all that much to write home about? Do you think that the behavior of Jazz's mother is kind of strange and some of the things that she does and says don't really add up? Do you think that Jazz is at fault here, or just a person who is trying to find their way in the world, is being taken advantage of by the people around them, by TLC? Do you like this show on TLC? Do you watch it? And what do you generally make of this issue overall? As always, if you like the video, hit subscribe and the thumbs up button. If you want to leave a comment, feel free to do so. Just be respectful about it. And I will see you guys next time.